On this episode of the podcast, I have with me Hrishank Jhildiyal. He is the head of analytics at Rokt. We're going to be talking about the business impact and the growth of engineering and data. Obviously, you still have to build the right relationships, right stakeholders, but engineering is seeping into data. Data is becoming more complicated and complex to deliver. And I'm super excited to have you on, Hrishank. Thanks for being on the show.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely excited to cover these topics with you. Before we do, let's start to get to know what some of your responsibilities are and what your company does, and then we'll dive in after that.
So I'll start with the company. Rokt is an e-commerce technology provider. We sit at the intersection of a three-way marketplace. We have partners on one side. Think of your Uber Eats. Think of your Wayfair's, Ticketmaster. We have advertisers on the other side, like your Apple, Hulu, Disney, Showtime. And we have the supply, which is the customers who visit those partner sites. We sit in the middle on the confirmation page largely, which is a thank you page. We're exploring other pages as well, but primarily sit on that page and own placements in which we render offers from those advertisers to those customers. And what makes us special is that we use a mixture of relevancy, right, and a fair bit of deep learning to provide the right offer to the right customer at the right time. And as a consequence of that, customers appreciate our offers a lot more than they would if there was no personalization involved. And as a consequence, we drive a lot of value to the advertisers because we give them better advertiser outcomes. And on the partner side, it is on the confirmation page, which is a largely unexplored page for a lot of partners, and the customers made their purchase, so everything else is a delight and a positive to them. So we've to some degree, Rokt has captured that space, and we're exploring new horizons, like the payments page and the upsells page and so on, right now, and we'll continue to do so in the future. So, as you can imagine, analytics plays a fairly important role in the company. There are quite a few teams that drive our North Star metric of value per transaction. So there are machine learning engineering teams, our go-to-market teams, our product teams. And analytics really helps drive value throughout this entire chain. So obviously helping go-to-market with client relationships and ensuring that we're able to analyze things for them, report things for them, model things for them. On the product side, it's really about building out the right frameworks, the right metrics, the right customer behavioral analyses, experiment analysis, causal inference. And on the machine learning engineering side, it's more so about which features should we be exploring, what should you add in, why are certain outcomes showing the way they are, and exploring anomalies. So to that end, the team does quite a varied amount of work. And as you mentioned earlier, one of the key things to ensure that all of that is running smoothly and successfully is a good engineering backend that allows for standardized insights, allows for robustness of and non-brittle, prevents non-brittle pipelines, and really ensures that we have governed data sets that can be used for hardened insights, if you will.
Yeah, it definitely seems integral, and it kind of ties into the first part of the podcast where we're talking about business impact. And I know I've had discussions with AI leaders, and we're talking about AI first or native AI products, and that's distinct versus products that incorporate or use AI. It's interesting because as I'm hearing you talk about the product and the role of analytics, and we're going to talk about business impact, but it really seems like it's analytics first. Like this is actually part of the core, helps drive. People need this to really drive most of the value of the product. So I guess let's talk about that. Let's talk about the business impact if you can, and we'll start from there.
So impact is key. I mean, it should be key for everybody. The analytics teams, like I mentioned, they provide metrics, analyses, models, data products, you name it. Well, how do we drive impact? And, we subscribe to the OKR framework that Google came up with a while back, the Objective and Key Results framework. And we evaluate our company OKRs and how those OKRs flow into our stakeholder team OKRs. that's what we base our OKRs off of. So there's a very strong alignment with what our stakeholder teams want on the product and go to market and the engineering side, and how we can just help them crush those OKRs reactively and proactively. So that means a variety of different things. There are a few pillars that I like to base my thinking off of, and as I think about driving impact, and that's on stakeholder alignment. It's on the right types of deep dives and reporting, if you will, observational studies and models, and then finally data tools. Those are the four things that I think really become a force multiplier in any organization. Obviously, some of that varies depending on the stage of the organization and the maturity of the team. Personally, I plan my team's OKR using a healthy mix of two things. One is working backwards from our large stakeholder needs. And the second one is placing bets on adding values in the ways that stakeholder teams don't think they need, but from institutional knowledge that they will benefit from. So on a day-to-day basis, that translates into training analysts to be curious and look beyond what the numbers are saying into how asks fit into the broader context. That's key. If they're not asking questions to their stakeholders and delivering what they want and beyond, they're not being thought partners. And so as analytics leaders, it's imperative. It's an opportunity to help analysts mature, right? And then as a consequence, make the team mature. On the analytics engineering side, it's ensuring that we're building as robust pipelines as possible and building the right curated data sets that have a massive amount of impact across the entire organization and allow for self-serve, right? Among many other things. Same thing applies for data scientists. But in practice, making your team provide impact really depends on your management style, right? And in my particular style, I like to help my analysts run effective office hours, make sure that they're aligned to stakeholder groups and the managers are aligned to stakeholder groups rather than them being ticket pushers where you have a broad service desk and no one's developing institutional knowledge. That usually leads to diffused and shallow impact, at least in my experience. Having them, own their own pieces of work end to end, making sure that I'm giving my managers and my directs guidance on, where I can let them own things fully, where I will provide guidance based on their, tenure and things of that nature.
I was going to ask you before we pass it, your team, how is it set up? Are you guys centralized? Are you guys distributed? How's the team set up?
So I've come from places where teams have been decentralized. Amazon is a big one, but that's 10,000 people. Rokt is about 600 people right now. And so the team is centralized. So we do have a couple of teams that are analytics adjacent. One of them is a reporting team that allows clients to get insights into some basic canned reporting without having to tap into a virtual private cloud. But internally, my team is aligned with, I have a couple of different teams. One of those is obviously the go-to-market analytics team. I have a product analytics team, a data science team, and an analytics engineering team. So those are the four. And then I have a couple of folks who work on other things like FP&A operations, things of that nature. So that's that tight alignment that I was talking about earlier on the analyst side, and then more broader alignment across variety of groups across the analytics engineering and the data science side.
You mentioned the business impact, and I think you kind of walked us through some of the pillars and how you approach it. Are there particular metrics that you pay attention to? And the reason I'm asking is, when you talk to somebody on the software engineering team, they have a little bit more dotted line to seeing the product out in the wild, getting direct feedback. When you're focused on analytics or shared services or other disciplines, sometimes that's not as clearly visible. I mean, there's a massive impact, but it's the metrics that you're measuring to be able to, obviously you want to celebrate the team, celebrate the wins. You have to manage the team to certain metrics through your hierarchy, your reporting structure. Can you touch on what metrics you like to look at in terms of being able to identify and track that impact?
So there are a few that are really important to me. after a while, let me classify them into a couple of different pillars. So one of those is build, the other one is operational excellence, and the third one is sustain. So on the build side, it is how many data products do we own, right? How many analysis templates do we own that helps us standardize the brand and our impact and our value proposition across the organization? How many dashboards do we own? How many pipelines do we own? On the operational excellence side, that's a lot more on the analytics engineering front. How many errors do we get per day? How many breakages do we have? How many warnings are triggered? How many retries did we have? How many queries are running inefficiently? Right? How many notebooks are not working the way they're expected to? So that's on the operational excellence, and how we're improving that is very key. And then we have sustain. And sustain is my least favorite, but it's a very necessary evil. Right? So that's how many manual things are we doing, essentially, that may or may not be automatable, but ideally they are automatable, and you move from sustain into operational excellence or build.
Let me ask you this question, because as you were talking about those metrics, and I was listening, and I was like, there's a build component. And I know I mentioned, I guess we talked about it before recording, and even in the intro, we talked about the growth of the engineering side in data, right? It's before it was a lot of tools driven aspects of the job. That's when I was in data, when I was in BI, it was a lot of tools, right? You didn't write a ton of code. Now Python is a core of almost every aspect that you guys touch, or Scala or something similar of your team. And when I hear about build, and I'm like, oh, we are pulling in the engineering terms, right? We are kind of seeing that growth. Can you touch on, how that's shifted, and kind of the makeup of the team, and how that engineering mindset is kind of proliferating through what you've seen?
Like I said, build is very important. And where I see the industry going is that a lot of the analysts will have some analytics engineering knowledge by default. They will have some data science knowledge by default, and you'll build a person who can do a lot more than be day in day out SQL and Excel, or SQL and whatever, Tableau. And so to help them grow their their footprint and the amount of impact they make, getting that engineering component is key, because even without that component, you can build models, or you can build reports, or you can do analyses, but they're not scalable. And you need to ensure that scalability is a key thing. And that's one of the tenets of my team. And to that end, the way I see analysts evolving is they all manage their own pipelines. They have their own monitors for data quality checks, for anomaly detection. They build their own curated data sets that may be in their field or can have a larger, impact across the organization, right? They do their own data governance through asset management tools like metadata catalogs, right? They do, some of them, some very talented analysts that I've managed in the past have even managed Redshift clusters. They can do their own vacuuming, they build their own they flag their own bad queries, etc. Some of them do reverse ETLs and do things like HubSpot, and then build feature stores for things like machine learning models. So as we do that, what's really important is for us to inculcate a culture where it's engineering first and product-centric thinking. And to that end, it's really just you can get people started, analysts or data scientists or analytics engineers started with a a framework. And so that's how do you set anything up? How do you set things up for scale? How do you set up things to be robust, right, and fail-proof? So that might be your monitors, your alarms, Datadog integrations, might be your DAGs that you create in Airflow, or DBT models that you use to build pipelines in a way that scales really nicely. So those are the things that I like inculcating and teaching, and ensuring that everybody just makes that a part of their day-to-day.
Awesome. And you mentioned, it's interesting, you talked about scale. And I guess if we're going to go back to the origin of, business intelligence and analytics, scale was, it was internal. That was the biggest problem you had was, can I, provide the reporting analytics to a bigger user group? Now, as this is now customer facing and you kind of, talking about the productization, setting up for scale, do you see, and again, we're talking about the engineering aspect and data and some of the scaling. Are you seeing in terms of what you're managing, the skill sets becoming much more specialized as, you might need somebody who's, data ops, ML ops savvy on your team? I mean, it seems like, software engineering, these specializations are growing and they've been there. Data seems like it's starting to get to that point.
Yeah, I think it's all going to get there with the ease of use of technology. I won't say that analytics, at least in my experience, is there yet when it, as it pertains to ML ops. But I know a lot of analysts have done database management, right? And they just do that as their day to day. That's a very common thing at Amazon, for example. But I do see it growing, with the advent of things like creating a large language model with 20 lines of code, training on a database. It's really very easy for analysts to access things and build things up in templatized ways and just learn through that. So anyone who knows Python, right? Anyone who knows R can start building these things up because there's such a vast amount of knowledge out there that it's really about how curious they are and how they want to grow. So in a way that ties into their career development and how they want to take, which direction they want to take their career in. So some of them want to be more data product managers, right? And that's also another thing that analytics teams own or manage from time to time. Some of them switch from data engineering into data science because, as you may have heard, most of data science is actually data engineering that takes 90% of the work. So there's a lot of movement as a consequence of that. And it's about how curious they are and how they want their career to grow.
Something that just popped in my head. I asked the last two engineering leaders I had on, I asked them, I'm going to ask you because I'm curious. And obviously you're talking about, we've touched on data science, ML, AI. Obviously, the rate of change in the data space is getting really fast. I mean, the technologies that are coming out, the skill sets required. There's a component that I asked the engineering leaders about FOMO, the fear of missing out. And it's obviously no engineering leader is going to jump, but there's a constant pressure to evaluate technology, to find an opportunity, to know a trend, to spot a trend. Can you give your company an advantage? Do you spend much time, or somebody on your team spends time to kind of do some of that forward researching, or maybe it's something you like and you enjoy in your own, but how do you try to see if you could find that early edge, but also not taking an insane risk, right? No one's going to go throw caution to the wind. That's a tough situation for all the leaders right now.
Yeah, it's an interesting one, and that really depends on your style as well, because some people really enjoy exploring solutions that are fully managed, and some people really enjoy exploring open source solutions that they have to do all the legwork for themselves. I fall in the latter camp, and you're right. I think it's all about exploring new solutions, but not just solutions that are new to you, but that are new to most people in the organization. So, as a very concrete example of that, I really like exploring causal inference solutions. I really like getting knee deep into, or maybe I think it's neck deep into experimentation and driving value there, because there are other people in the organization who may either not be thinking about causal inference at all, or there may be an opportunity to improve experimentation, or it might be something else. And so finding the avenue where you can drive value and that no one else is driving value, and ensuring that there's a set of business problems to be solved with that, is that sweet spot. With that in mind, what I personally do is I just nerd out. Sometimes I'll spend weekends and just explore it myself. And then I just like teaching it. So I'm a big proponent of L&D programs, and I teach things like time series causal inference or propensity score modeling, or things of that nature in my team. Or it might be something as basic as how to use Redshift effectively. But to your point about exploring new technologies, that's always top of mind. But I'm more of an open source. I am inclined towards open source.
That's interesting. Yeah, and I guess that's maybe as you mentioned, managed services, tool-driven solutions, as people have embraced open source, and a lot more of that engineering component has been brought in because a lot of these tools are, what do you want to do with them? It's an open field. It's not a defined box. This thing is a black box, does it, does something very specific. It's not, hey, you can do what you want with it. When you mentioned, you spend the time, you ramp up, you take it to your team. Is there a threshold in terms of like, what, I feel really confident. It's, I can present this to the team. Is it a case of, let's present it, have dialogue? At what point do you feel like, hey, I should bring the team into a particular technology?
Yeah, I would say there's no good answer for that. But it's sometimes I learn from other people. So there's that. But to answer your question, it's really if I can use it effectively and validate my own build of a certain algorithm or a new product with different folks within the company, with industry standards and people I know and trust outside of my company. I'm more than open to showing that to my team, because then they just need to learn it. They just need to get familiar with it, and those who are more curious will just take a shine to it and then start running with it. And then that's when I might even learn some things from them once they've gone farther down the road than I have.
Nice. I like that. I guess before I let you go, I like to ask every guest this question. And it's, if you could have a future guest on the show, cover something, whatever topic you'd like, what would you like to hear about?
One of the things that I constantly think about is how I can, as an analytics team, how I can drive value to machine learning engineering teams. And as the growth of AI-centric companies explodes, really, this will become more and more important. And so how analytics teams drive value to MLE teams, or how MLE teams work with other teams so they can generate value across the entire company, right? That's a really important thing to me, and I'd love to see someone talk about that.
Awesome. Yeah, I definitely need to find a guest who's got some thoughts on that. It'd be a very good one. Hrishank, how should somebody get a hold of you? You've obviously talked about a lot of different things. If somebody wants to pick your brain, what's a good avenue to contact you?
Yeah, it's find me on LinkedIn. It's linkedin.com/Hrishank. Very easy.
Okay.
And yeah, I'm happy to chat with anybody who's interested.
Awesome. Hey man, thanks for coming on. Thanks for sharing. Been insightful. I've appreciate your time.
Yeah, pleasure chatting with you, Amir.
All right. That's it for this episode. Be back again, different guest, different topic. Until then, two things. One, if you know someone that has experience driving value through those machine learning engineering teams, and obviously they're probably super busy right now as it's all exploding and growing, but I'd love to have somebody on with that background to kind of talk and share with the community. That'd be awesome. Reach out. And secondly, if you like the episode, share it with somebody else. Like, comment, subscribe. Leave a review wherever you are listening to this episode. I'd love that. That's how we've been growing. So thank you very much. Until next time, thank you and goodbye.